512. We are part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I am Tyler, and with me as always is Smitty. If you want to follow us on Twitter, go follow us. We're doing a giveaway right now, and it's ending pretty soon. I mean, Steelers season is coming up pretty close. We're trying to give away some tickets to Steelers-Ravens. As soon as we get to 17,000 followers on Twitter, we're giving away those tickets. Also, the pinned tweet on our Twitter is our Christmas fundraiser, Rocking Around the 412. We launched in July. If you want to go check that out and read the mission, you can also go to GoFundMe.com and type in Rocking Around the 412. You can read all about our Christmas fundraiser. We've done it the past several years. This is our 5th year doing it. And the last thing is we have our own personal channels on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else that you listen to podcasts. So what are you doing? You need to follow us there. Give us a like, subscribe, rating, whatever you want to give us. Help us out. It does a lot for us.
Yeah, good stuff. I want to tell everybody while we're starting this off as well, if you were expecting to hear literally anything about the Pirates or Penguins in this episode, turn off the episode right now because it's not going to happen. This episode is going to be all Steelers entire way through. We're only going to have a couple segments here, but there's really just not anything to talk about with the other two teams right now. Like, I don't know. What are we supposed to do here? Like, we talked about Mike Vellucci being signed to an extension. We talked about how bad the Pirates are, that they're on pace to lose 100 games again when that doesn't happen ever in back-to-back seasons, but the Pirates are going to do it. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to talk about the Steelers because there's so many things to talk about when it comes to the team. They made some cuts today. They had to make some cuts. They cut the roster by 5 players down to 80. And then the big one is going to be the next one when they go all the way to 53. And that's where you could probably see some surprises and stuff. But I think there was a surprise one in this batch too. Genard Avery, who we brought over from Philly, who's played middle linebacker and edge, also a really big special teams contributor. He's been dealing with some injuries throughout camp for the Steelers and everything like that. But he did play in their past preseason game, and I thought he was one of the better players on the field for them. So to me, this is a bit of a surprise just because you also look at like the edge depth that the team has, and that was one of the positions when we've talked about like where could they still add by the time that other teams are trimming their rosters. I would have said another edge. Like I would have liked to have seen them bring in a third guy and have Avery as the fourth. But, you know, obviously the team feels like they've seen enough from like a Derek Tuska or a Hamaka Rashid Jr. to who they claimed when they got rid of, shout out to UG3, my boy, Ulysses Gilbert. I mean, is this a sign to you that they've seen enough from one of those two guys, or is this a sign like another move is coming from, you know, somebody else is going to be cut from a different roster?
I mean, it could be both. It's a peculiar move to me for sure. Just because, like you said, the depth at edge is one of the concerns on defense, and if they've seen enough from those guys, then that's fine. But in terms of like, is this a move to cut somebody and then bring in somebody else? Why couldn't they cut one of the other guys if they were going to do that? That would be my question. Is it, like, why did it have to be Avery instead of Rashid or Tuska? I don't know. Maybe they have seen enough from both those guys, but I don't think the two correlate. I think it's either one or the other. Now, as far as bringing another edge in, I don't know who that would be. It is the one that's being thrown.
They're probably still on another roster right now. That's the thing,
right? But yeah, as far as like on roster goes, maybe they've seen enough. I'm not qualified to say. I can give my opinions all day on here, but I would think that the Steelers know more than I do. And so if they think that the other two have performed well enough that they can stay on the roster spots and Avery doesn't, then it is what it is. We don't have to agree with it. But that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah, it's just hard to imagine. You know, we're talking about 2 undrafted guys, not in the same draft class. Hamaka Rashid Jr. was just last year. He spent with the Jets. And Tuska, I can't remember what year he was, but I know he was an intriguing prospect. Like the Broncos were pretty upset when we brought him over from their practice squad. But it's just, to me, neither one of those guys screams edge 3. And the thing with that is it's like, you're not just talking about a backup like to TJ and Alex Highsmith. We know how the Steelers want to use a third edge rusher. And we know that with everything that TJ deals with all the double teams, with all the punishment he takes, going balls to the walls, essentially, literally every single snap, he's going to need his breathers, and he's not going to be able to play every single snap. And same with Alex Highsmith. And and that's not even considering injury, right? Like, do we really feel comfortable enough with what's in that room right now? To me, that's a no. And that's, you know, and I think that I would you'd have a hard time convincing me that the Steelers are that convinced that the edge 3 is on the roster right now. I think they are going to bring in somebody else there. I will be very surprised, and people can go back and clip this and send it to me if it doesn't happen. I'll be very surprised if they don't add another edge rusher before they go to Cincinnati for week 1.
Yeah, I feel like they have to. And like you said, the way that the Steelers like to use a third edge rusher, I mean, think to what Melvin Ingram was doing with the Steelers before he went to Kansas
Highsmith
City.
his rookie year.
And Highsmith his rookie year as well, yeah. And like you said, looking at the history of the Steelers and what's happened the past few years, I mean, we're going to need 3 edge rushers in terms of just flat out health. That's just kind of the way it goes. You can't expect TJ and Alex to be the only guys that are on the field 24/7 the entire year. You just can't really expect that. So I would think they would bring somebody in just because, I mean, no offense to like Tuska and Rashid, but like, I just don't think you guys are it. Like that just flat out. I don't think that you guys
as a fourth edge rusher, sure.
Sure. But like, if you have to step up and be a starter, I'm not convinced that we'll get the production on the edge that we will need to have to be successful on defense.
Yeah. I mean, look at last year as the example, with TJ Watt missing the time that he did. And Alex Highsmith right now is dealing with an injury currently to his ribs. So, like, I mean, what are we doing here? They're like, I don't know that you have a capable guy of stepping into play for either one of those two right now on the roster, like in a third edge rusher capacity, like as your number one alternative. I don't see it on the roster. I don't think that the Steelers necessarily see it on the roster. I think that there is definitely going to be a move on the horizon. And shout out to Zach Celedonia. I don't know if I've ever shouted him out on this podcast, so I don't want to give him too much praise here. But he did throw a name out there, Trey Flowers, who was I want to say was a pretty highly paid guy from, I believe he came over. Yeah, he was, because he was a Patricia guy from the Patriots to the Lions. Apparently he's on the roster bubble there. I don't know how much cap that they can get out of by cutting him. But he'd be another edge guy, I think, that could be interesting. We'll see. Maybe he'll get cut on Hard Knocks. Who knows? And we could see it happen because we actually play the Lions in our final preseason game, which apparently maybe Dan Campbell's making the decision for the Steelers how long their starters are playing or something. Did you see that?
No,
it was like Dan Campbell. So I'm assuming, I didn't know it worked like this, but I guess like Tomlin and Dan Campbell have already like talked about how long the starters are going to play for each team. Dan Campbell was talking to the media, and he said that the starters outside of Jared Goff were probably going to play about a half in their preseason game. Because the Steelers are doing that as well. And I was like, what? Like, and this was on, Monday that this was said. And I'm like, how does Dan Campbell know that the Steelers are playing their starters for a half?
So that's just like already predetermined. They've already discussed it.
I don't know if that's.
Wait, was that announced on Hard Knocks or just to the media?
No. Yeah, just to the media.
Oh, I thought that was like news breaking on Hard Knocks too. That'd be even.
I mean,
even
it might be
funny.
the new Hard Knocks comes out tonight. Or yesterday when you're watching or listening to this. So they'll be preparing for the Steelers on that episode.
That's strange.
Interesting. When we come back, we're still gonna be talking about. Oh, you got something?
Well, I was gonna say there's one more cut that I feel like we need to talk about briefly. Yeah. Chris Oladokun, 7th round pick in this year's draft. It was questionable when it was made. Like, why were they drafting another quarterback? And we tried to give some justification for it. Like, maybe they look to move on from like Mason Rudolph, and they have him as the third quarterback. Maybe they're just going to carry 3 and then expect him to be on the practice squad. And that might still be the case, but he was waived today as well. And it just seems very odd to me that if this is going to be the way it was, I mean, he hasn't played in the preseason at all. He's probably gotten very limited snaps in camp, and it just seems like it's a waste of a draft pick. Now, that's not to say that a 7th round pick is going to make the team no matter who it is, but an additional quarterback when you already have 3 quarterbacks that are fighting for a starting spot, and the other 2 will probably fill out the depth chart. It just seems like it is a waste, and it was a waste at the time. We tried to justify it, but we couldn't, and now he's waived, and he might end up out on the practice squad if nobody picks him up. But it just seems like that is just such a wasted pick and a confusing one.
Yeah. Well, you know what? This will actually be perfect. When we come back, we're going to talk about quarterbacks, so we'll just continue the conversation, pick back up right there when we come back. This is Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. All right, and welcome back to Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm Smitty. That is Tyler. Yeah, let's pick up this conversation with Chris Oladokun in the quarterback room. So, waiving Chris Oladokun, the 7th-round pick, which, like you said, was very questionable at the time, and you started thinking, I think a lot of people, their mind just went to Mason Rudolph and trying to correlate that to a trade. But here's the thing, like, especially in NFL now, where like you still know like COVID could play an impact in the season if one of the guys gets it in the room and stuff. Like Chris Oladokun is not a guy that you were going to feel comfortable with going into a game in any situation, being dressed for a game. Like he was destined to be the practice squad quarterback, if anything, this year, and that still very well could be the case. But I think what honestly I'm starting to feel is they're going to keep all three, including Mason Rudolph.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see them wanting to move on. Like I think that most teams are going to want to have three options there. And, say what you will about, the upper level talent of the quarterback room, but 1 through 3, I mean, you have 3 guys that can play in the NFL on the Steelers roster right now. So that's pretty good. Like they're going to have to be, in my opinion, I don't want to say like blown away, but given more value than what we think Mason Rudolph is worth to actually move him. And I just don't see it happening. So I think Mason Rudolph will be on the Steelers roster this year. As far as like, we talked about the pick when it happened, and it was just like, we knew they wanted to go into camp with 4 quarterbacks. They literally were telling everybody that they keep most things close to the vest. They were literally telling everybody out loud, we're going to camp with 4 quarterbacks. So we knew one way or another, they were going to leave the draft, whether it was a undrafted free agent or something signing. And maybe that was why they took him in the 7th round, because they thought somebody else would sign him and they didn't want to have to worry about, maybe paying him more as an undrafted free agent as opposed to a 7th round pick value. So I guess from that standpoint, it kind of made sense. But yeah, this guy's been given like no reps at all, through camp. We haven't seen him play in the preseason. Like he's not even showcasing to get a job somewhere else, which is to me why it's like, I don't want to say like the Steelers did him dirty or this, like they're trying to figure out their starting quarterback spot. They can't be worrying about like this 4th guy getting reps. But at the same time, like he really hasn't had a chance to showcase for anywhere else. I think that the Steelers do circle back and he ends up as their practice squad quarterback this year. That's at least what I'm hoping for him, because again, he really didn't get much of a shot to do anything. And the Steelers are really the only team that's been able to see him do anything. So hopefully that's the way that plays out. But let's continue talking about quarterbacks. I've mentioned Rudolph and Oladokun so far. What about the other 2 guys? Like the 2 guys actually competing for that number 1 spot. That was maybe like, we could talk about this game, I guess, a little bit with the Jaguars on Saturday. A hard game to watch. If you want to call that a football game, go ahead. I have a hard time justifying calling that a football game. The biggest part of that was the O-line, and I want to talk about that separately. But let's start with the fact that we did see Kenny Pickett go in earlier than we saw him go into game 1. We saw him play with some starters, going against some Jacksonville starters. He was only in for 8 snaps, and he really didn't even have an incompletion. The only incompletion was a spike to stop the clock. And he also had 2 completions taken away from him by penalties that were not him. They were holding calls. Has Kenny Pickett, in your mind, done enough to make this more of a conversation than what we thought it was going to be? Even just like maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever it might be, like, where are you at with this quarterback competition? Is Kenny Pickett making a push to start week 1 in Cincinnati?
I think absolutely he's making a push. As far as what Kenny has shown goes, I think that he's impressed me a lot. I knew that I had faith that he could be a serviceable starting quarterback, but I didn't know if that would be right away. And I've said that pretty much all along. I thought that best case scenario, he sits a year under Mitch and all that, and then he could take over the reins then. Because, I mean, any rookie quarterback, no matter how highly touted they are, where they're at in the draft, you have no idea how they're going to perform once they actually get the pads on and get into that NFL level. And he's impressed so far. So do I think that he has pushed harder for that number 1 spot? Absolutely. Now, would I give it to him is the true question. Personally, I'm still riding with Mitch right now.
Okay. All right.
I think that you bring in Mitch. He has the veteran experience at the position. And not to say that I think that Pickett is too young and too inexperienced to start, but he did play against some starters in this Jacksonville game. But I think the regular season is just a whole different animal than a preseason game. And so I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves on some preseason games and then throw him into the regular season week 1 against the Bengals, he gets trashed. I don't want that to happen. I would prefer to have the just experience of Mitch in there, because honestly, either one, I don't think you can go wrong right now. No, honestly, all three of them, personally, like even Mason Rudolph,
played well.
like none of them have shown that they are not deserving of having a shot at starting quarterback. So I think I'm still rolling with Mitch in week 1 to have that NFL experience at the position. And worst case scenario is you can always go to one of the other guys if Mitch doesn't play well. But I think that you brought Mitch in for a reason, and I still think that Kenny can benefit from sitting under a guy like Mitch and watching from the sidelines and learning that way as well, instead of being the starting quarterback right away. Now, if he ends up the starter, that's great. I think any of these guys will do fine. But in my opinion, I would personally still start Mitch and then have Kenny as the number 2 right now.
Yeah, I mean, the gap has significantly closed for me, though, to the point where it's like almost 50-50 with what I think that they're going to do. What do I want them to do? Like you said, I don't know that they can really go wrong in my mind right now. Like, Trubisky really hasn't shown anything to me to make him lose the job. Like, if he was starting out as QB1, I haven't seen anything to really make him lose it. If anything, it's Pickett just showing that much more that he deserves it, if anything. I guess I'm kind of with you, and I think RG3 made an interesting point about this. He was just having an exchange with somebody on Twitter, and he said you can start Trubisky and go to Pickett. You can't start Pickett and go to Trubisky if things go bad. And I thought that was an interesting point. One, well, the Steelers, I don't know that they're going to think like that, not living in their fears,
Mm-hmm.
But I guess his point was you can't justify giving Pickett the reins right away, and then if he struggles, go to Trubisky due to the backlash that you would receive there, for one, and just what could that do to the guy's confidence. I'm not necessarily somebody that's worried about Pickett losing confidence. I just don't think he's that type of guy. I think that he carries himself so well. He's also somebody, going back to your point about I feel like we know what the floor is. Like, I think the question always has been, does he have that high of a ceiling? And that's yet to be determined. But I think that we've always just looked at him as, this guy's at least going to be an average NFL starter, and that's why I think it's he's prone. It's not possible for him to suck. Like, he's too good pre-snap. He's too good of a processor. He's too athletic out of the pocket. He does too much out of structure. I just think that there's too many things that this guy possesses to make him a complete failure. So I don't necessarily see that in the realm of possibility. But as of right now, and here's the other part of this too. We haven't seen Pickett actually start a football game, which that's why I would love for him to be the first quarterback in this finale on Sunday. And we haven't seen Mitch Trubisky in any 2-minute situations. And we've seen the opposite for the other one in those scenarios. So hopefully we can see those guys go through those different circumstances, and that could ultimately be what makes up my mind, because right now I'm at about a 50-50, like I said. Probably slightly leaning Trubisky just because he was the incumbent guy and, in my opinion, hasn't done anything to lose the job. But this last preseason game is going to be pretty telling. We don't know, we don't know who's starting it yet. Obviously, Tomlin hasn't stated that, but it's going to decide a lot of things, and it's what makes this preseason going from 4 games to 3 games that much more interesting.
It's interesting to me that point that RG3 made. Like, if you start Kenny, you cannot go to Mitch. Like, you just have to. You're just going to. I mean,
that's just one guy's opinion. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And maybe the Steelers feel differently, and I'm sure if the Steelers have this quarterback that's struggling, they're just not going to keep him out there. But that is a good point to make. I mean, mentally, what does that do to a guy? And it's not that Pickett is never seemed like a guy that would really struggle mentally in the game. Mm-hmm. Just watching him at Pitt, he never really seemed like that. He seemed like the greatest competitor. But I think my opinion still stands. Like, I just think that I would start Mitch because at worst you have the safety net of Kenny, and I know Steelers fans probably don't want to hear it. You also have the safety net of Mason Rudolph as well, because talking about him, what has he really shown in the preseason that he doesn't belong on the roster either? I know Steelers fans want to hate Mason Rudolph as much as they can, but in the 2 games that they've played, I don't think any of the quarterbacks, including him, have played bad.
No, I think that he's had, some of the best throws throughout this, and he also led the game-winning touchdown drive. That was a funny scene because he hits Tyler Snead, who's 5'7", for the game-winning touchdown, and then obviously everybody goes and like surrounds him, and Mason literally picks him up. Like normally you see like an offensive lineman be the guy to pick him up, but yeah, I mean that's the thing. I think that the Steelers like him enough to keep him around as a safety net for the roster. Like you mentioned, a safety net in Pickett. I think Rudolph is kind of the safety net for the QB room because you know what you have in him. Sure, like the ceiling's not super high, but you've won football games with him. What I feel like you know everything about the guy. It's not possible for them to learn anything new. They know the limitations that he has. I feel like they know how to build an offense around his strengths. I don't have an issue with them keeping all three of these guys around.
No, I think it's smart, and they've all shown they belong. It's curious to me. I didn't think that we'd really be discussing like who would be the starting quarterback after the second preseason game. I thought it would be more clear cut than this. Like
Yeah.
I thought it would be more determined at least.
And that's the thing that I keep going back to is and it's still like it's so impressive because it has nothing to do with Mitch and it's all about what Pickett is doing himself. Like it's not like a case where because I know a lot of people are talking about like the Matt Flynn, Russell Wilson thing. It's like, no, Flynn was that bad and Russell Wilson was that good. This is just like a case of, both. Trubisky's obviously been limited in what he can show because of the offensive line and everything like that. But he's shown enough again to me, like I'd be fine with him starting. It's just way more about what Pickett's showing. I don't think anybody's like not doing anything, like I don't think Trubisky's fallen off a cliff here and letting Pickett take the job. I think Pickett's just trying to snatch it, even with Trubisky playing pretty well.
It'll be interesting. I haven't really thought about what you said. The like playing in certain situations, like Kenny starting and then Mitch going into the 2-minute drill. I'd like to see that.
Also, here, let's talk about this. We can tie these two things together. With the offensive line, I've seen a lot of people make the argument that they don't want to see Pickett yet because of the state of the offensive line. To me, that's not one to make. Like, if you want to find a different reason to start Trubisky, that's fine.
Are they saying they want to protect the quarterback?
Yeah, basically, like they don't want to put a rookie quarterback in Pickett in what's hopefully the franchise guy behind this offensive line and get him killed. I just don't think that that's an argument to make. I mean, imagine trying to sell that as an organization. We did nothing to improve the offensive line. It's still as bad as it has been the last couple of years, so we can't play our first-round quarterback. I mean, I don't know what you think about that, but to me, that was just like, I was flabbergasted when I saw people saying this.
I think that makes no sense. I think either way, it would be different to me if like maybe you're worried about one can't move, but either Mitch or Kenny can move around. I don't really think it matters. And going back to, I'm looking at college stats because anybody who watched Kenny at Pitt in 2019, Pitt did not have a good offensive line, and Kenny was scrambling around the whole time. He threw for over 3,000 yards that year, and I think that he was fine. Like I'm not really worried about it. I don't think that Steeler fans should be worried about that. If there's going to be a reason to start or sit a quarterback, it's not going to be the offensive line because the offensive line isn't going to change no matter who the quarterback is.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, when are you hoping that it changes so that Pickett can play? Like, okay, so not this year, not the entire year. You don't want to see Kenny Pickett because of the offensive line. You think that they spend a first-round pick on an offensive lineman next year that's just going to fix the whole thing? Or like with
well, that, and then you're going to have to see the improvement at every other spot on the offensive line.
Yeah, it's just this isn't something that's just going to be fixed overnight. I mean, I don't know.
And who knows? I mean, maybe we also might be jumping the gun on the offensive line a little bit. I mean, they've been awful in the preseason, but there's still 17 games of regular season to play through, so maybe we see a progression over the 17 games as well. I mean, it's possible. But like I said, the first two preseason games, and especially this second one against the Jags, it has not been pretty up front.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about it. I mean, I don't know. We should just stop the show right here, and the rest of the show be us playing Ramon Foster talking about the offensive line, because that was beautiful. The way that he can talk about the offensive line, football in general, but like specifically the offensive line, obviously being an offensive lineman himself. it's just so frustrating to watch. Like all the guys in sync, like their pad levels are so high, they're so stiff. There's really like Mason Cole's been decent at center, so obviously we've at least upgraded there from Kendrick Green last year to him. But James Daniels, what a disappointment that he's been up to this point coming over. I know that we haven't played a regular season game yet, but like all the reports are about how bad this guy's struggled at training camp, and he's been bad through 2 preseason games. Like, when do we start seeing the guy that we've made this investment into? And then Dan Moore and Kendrick Green or Kevin Dotson, like whichever one was playing left guard. Dan Moore and Kevin Dotson played the 4th quarter in the 2nd preseason game because Tomlin thought that lowly of their performance. He was like, you guys are staying out there. I haven't seen enough. And then he berates the entire unit the very next day. I mean, this is so bad what we're seeing from this offensive line. You would have thought like after last year, man, this is really a wake-up call. And it's just, I understand that you have to have the talent too, but like, where's the pride? Like, show some pride in what you're doing in your work. I don't see anybody that's really like out there. I don't know. I don't want to question guys' work ethic, but it's just when you talk about 2 years in a row now of this unit looking like this. I understand we haven't played a regular season game yet, but it's just hard to imagine in just a couple weeks it's going to be transformed from what we're seeing right now and what we saw, 17 weeks last year.
I mean, I don't want to question their work ethic, but what I will question is, do they know what the actual problem is? Because I know Mason Cole was asked about what the problem was, and he said it had to do with their hands. But
fire in their hands.
Whenever I watched the offensive line, it had way more to do with their hands. It also had to do with their feet, their positioning.
Well, that's the thing.
I mean, they were so flat-footed. The one highlight of Kendrick Green where he's so flat-footed and just gets danced around is so pathetic. But you saw that multiple times on the offensive line that night. It wasn't just the hands. So it's like, do they even know what the full problem is? Because, I mean, not to sound like I'm smarter than them, I'm definitely not. I don't know more than them, but I can watch with my eyes and see that the hands are not just the problem.
Yeah, and if you're mentioning about the footwork, like DK was trying to get him to say something about the footwork. He specifically said, was that like something you guys were focusing on? And then Mason Cole went back answering with the answer about it being fire in the hands. It's everything. Like their pad, they're not getting low enough. Low man wins. That's the saying, right? They're not getting low enough. They're way too stiff. They're not firing their hands.
So you can fire the hands all you want, but if you were sitting there like a buoy in the middle of the ocean, you're going to get swam around. Literally, swim move. That's what happened to Kendrick Green, okay? It is not pretty. And you would think, like you said, last year, the offensive line was so bad, and it was very apparent. You would think you'd see some progression among some of the guys on the offensive line that were still here. And then we had high hopes for the 2 guys we brought in to be starters on this offensive line. Pretty much disappointments right now. I mean, Mason Cole has still been one of the better offensive linemen, but that's not saying much to this point, especially after this game last Saturday. I don't know what to expect. And all I say is, like, if this is the case, then at least we have more mobile of a quarterback. Because at least we can scramble a little bit now. Imagine if we had Ben, a 40-year-old Ben, going into this year.
Yeah.
He'd die. Yeah. He would literally die on the football field because his offensive line would get him killed.
I think I tweeted that if Ben was the one back there, he'd be ashes right now. That's literally like word for word what I tweeted.
His knees would be ashes. They would be dust because he'd be getting hit so many times over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think Mason Cole's been decent. And notice the one guy we haven't said by name was Chikwama Okorafor. It's just, we know what he is. He's a pretty good pass protector, and he offers nothing in the run game. And we saw that the one play where Benny Snell tried to get to the outside, and Okorafor like didn't seal, and it was a very easy play where like 7 Jaguars were on him very quickly. But I mean, we could go on and on talking about how poor this offensive line is. I guess the big question is, do you think that the starting 5 that they're going to roll into the season with, similar we talked about with the edge, do they bring in another body? Do you think that they're going to be looking for some type of offensive line upgrade between now and week 1 in Cincinnati?
They might be looking for an upgrade, but I don't think they're going to get it. That's the problem. I think that their best case scenario is sticking with what they got and hoping that they figure it out. And that might be a false hope, but that's what I think you have to happen. I just don't think they're going to get anybody. I think what's your best case scenario, figure out what you're doing at left guard, whether that's going to be Kendrick Green or Kevin Dotson. I feel like it's got to be Kevin Dotson. It has to. Kendrick Green was so bad. I don't know if his is a confidence thing or what. And I know he was asked about it, and he kind of like more so.
I do give him credit for answering. Yeah, I mean, he answers he's very honest about it.
Yeah, he's honest about it. I'll give him credit for that, but I don't know if that means like he's just like accepting that he sucks or or what. But I think that what you need to see in this third preseason game is, I think you need to see just more consistency on the offensive line, because I thought they had a decent game the first game, not like amazing, but like I thought in the run game they showed improvement. The passing game is where they were poor. The second game, it was awful all around. I think you just need to get more consistency from especially guys like Dan Moore Jr. and James Daniels. Those two in particular, because I feel like Mason Cole has shown enough where it's like, okay, we know what he's going to be. James Daniels, not what we expected. This dude was a Pro Bowler. What happened to that? And then Dan Moore, I mean, it's not like we had super high expectations for him, but you're kind of the incumbent left tackle. Why did you not take that next step? We haven't seen that next step from his rookie year. But yeah, it's easy to talk about. It's easier for me to talk about, but so far it's looking like more of the same when it comes to the offensive struggles, except for now we just have a mobile quarterback that can make plays despite that.
Yeah, it's going to mask some of the issues there, but the issues will definitely still exist. I think like
people complaining about Kenny's like time to throw. Why do you think that is? It has nothing to do with Kenny himself. It's because he has no time to throw the ball.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing is like in Mitch's like a full second less too. Like neither one of them have had. Okay, I mean we can go on and on about it, but the last thing that I wanted to say about this is going back to the left guard thing with Dotson and Green. They were both equally as bad against the run. The one difference was their pass protection grades. Now, say what you will about PFF, but I think that's the one like source where you can go to, and like offensive line is typically pretty well graded, or it's at least somewhere that is grading those. Like it's kind of hard, like other than Brandon Thorne, if you guys know who that is on Twitter, it's kind of hard to evaluate offensive line. But anyway, Kevin Dotson had an 80 grade in pass protection. They both had like 28 in run blocking.
Yeah.
A 28. I think I had a 29 on Saturday in run blocking. Just to show you guys. Yeah. But I don't know, like we were excited about that battle, like, you know, going throughout training camp. Now I'm like, man, it's just which one is not as bad. It's not even like which one's going to win the job. It's which one isn't going to completely.
Which one is the least bad?
Yeah. Which one sucks the least?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, the Steelers were at a BYU practices a couple weeks ago. Maybe they were watching Clark Barrington or Blake Freeland, one of those two, and they can help on the offensive line next year.
Dude, I feel like I've just been like stumbling over my words talking about the offensive line. Like they just got me so flustered right now. Anytime that I talk about the Steelers offensive line over the last like 3 seasons.
Dude, imagine being Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, or Mason Rudolph. You have to lie about your offensive line.
Yeah.
What do you think of those guys? I think they do a good job. They do a good job protecting me. They get a good, nice push up there. No, they don't. Yeah. You don't have to lie. We can see it too.
Here's the thing too that I thought was interesting. Like I understand that they haven't invested like a high pick, so how can you expect, much from them? Like Pouncey and DeCastro, who were here forever, were first round picks. But the other thing that the Steelers used to do really well was find guys and develop them, like Ramon Foster, like Alejandro Villanueva. If you guys remember Chris Hubbard, who used to be here and then, obviously went on to have a career in Cleveland as well. He played like a decade in the league too. I mean, they used to find and develop offensive linemen just as much as they would draft them in the first round and have studs. When you talked about like the Steelers, dominant offensive lines there in that 14, 8 to 18 years or whatever, like it was 2 first rounders and 3 guys that they found. So they were just as good at finding those guys, and they haven't done that recently. That's what I'm coming around to. That's the point that I'm trying to make. They've no longer been able to find those gems and develop them into anything. I'm not here to turn this into a conversation about Mike Munchak, but man, their lack of doing that, I think, is really started to rear its head as well in the last few seasons.
Maybe that's why they'll need to use a first-round pick on an offensive lineman next year.
Man, yeah. Or I don't know if I can even say find them in free agency. We'll see how the James Daniels thing goes, because that's what we used to say about the defensive backs. You know, if we can't draft them and develop them, we're going to have to find them from the outside, and that's what they did when they were able to build their secondary of Minkah Fitzpatrick and Joe Hayden and Steven Nelson. Found Mike Hilton, obviously, in the draft, undrafted. Man, they got to figure it out. They cannot be as bad as they are. If you give me an average offensive line, I'll take my chances. I think this
an
team
average offensive line. I think this offense is really good.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying.
I mean, it has a chance to be really good despite that, but
yeah,
average offensive line, you have a really good offense.
I would have very heightened expectations if we're talking about an average offensive line. But we're talking about, and still, what's still in my mind until they go out and prove differently, a bottom 5 offensive line. So, we will leave it there. We will leave it there, and we will see what comes of this final preseason game. So, which means by the next time that you're hearing from us, we're going to give our final predictions. If Tomlin already hasn't stated by that point who's going to be the starting quarterback when they go to Cincinnati, as well as what the final roster is going to look like, the final 53 men to make it. Again, could be some surprises in here. Maybe we'll talk about that. But until then, for Smitty, for Tyler, this has been Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us everywhere else. Wherever you're listening or watching to this, leave us a like, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.